Thank you. All right, welcome everybody. Go ahead and get started here with our 5:30 Sherwood City Council work session on August 20, 2024. Got one item on the agenda for the work session tonight, and that's the Murdoch Park Master Plan update. Rich, where's Rich? Are you delegating?
Thank you, Mayor. We have Brett with Lego and Hanson here. They've been working with us for, I think, since February, the Murdoch Master Plan. We've had some a good open house, very successful open house, also a online survey, and this is just kind of a roll up of that, of the first concept plan for Murdoch Park. So we're getting close to the end of it. We will have one more open house at the park. Get our mind the 29th of August. Brett, if you want to get started.
Sure thing. It's good to see you all again. Rich mentioned, I'm back to report back what we heard from the community and how we kind of interpreted what we heard from the community towards putting together a preferred plan for Murdoch Park. Just as kind of, I just wanted to throw this up as a reminder, always going back to the guiding principles for the project. Our directives were to provide green solutions, promote health and accessibility in the park, enhance the play experience, improve and expand park amenities, and provide an elevated park design. So just always want to kind of throw that out there just to remind everybody what we're going for. So we are now in phase 3. So in phase 2, as Rich mentioned, we developed 3 concept alternatives, which I presented to you. We prepared a survey, which we got just about 700 responses to. So we got a lot of feedback to sift through. So we're really kind of collecting the information we heard from you, from the Parks Board, and from the community in developing the next stage of the design. So what did we hear? So up here, I've got the 3 concepts that we presented. The survey we sent out, it was really set up to understand not only which of the 3 options was the most favored in the community, but also to understand which elements of the various designs people liked. So, option 2 was the preferred option. It's the option that people generally liked the best. I think people liked the amenities that it provided. They liked the location and style of the pond overlook, and just generally speaking, the structure kind of gave it the park with this kind of center of activity and kind of larger natural spaces. There were elements of option 1, however, that people preferred. So for example, in option 1, the location of the picnic shelter being kind of central to the park, overlooking the pond, was something that people really liked. As well, people really liked the playground location, which is fairly similar to the existing location. In option 3, people really seemed to heavily favor the path system. That's kind of this curvilinear path system, and as well, they preferred having a separate restroom separated from the shelter. Some of the other things we heard. The sports court. So option 2 had the sports court here, and that remained controversial. So there was a pretty even split between people saying, hey, that's a good idea, and other people just being really, it being kind of countered to the idea of this being a peaceful kind of more nature-y park. So we discussed this with the Parks Board and have in discussing that with them, they kind of unanimously agreed that due to their proximity to Snyder Park, which has a lot of sports courts, and the future park that's part of the development just to the east, that the neighborhood's well served for sports courts. And so probably what we want to do is approach this with, some active recreation, but not necessarily full-scale sports courts. Other feedback we received is that where possible, we should utilize existing park amenities. There's no, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And as well, really protect and enhance the natural feel of the park. So that's a general summary of the feedback. We have hundreds of comments if anybody's interested in a good read. So with all that, what we tried to do is we tried to synthesize all this information and adapt the different elements of the plan to create a preferred, what we hope becomes the preferred design. So we used option 2 as a framework. And so what does that mean? What we did is we provided a central cluster of park amenities that really kind of concentrate activity. And we do this in a way that, allows the active and passive recreation to kind of peaceably exist together, providing spaces for each. Within this, what I'm calling activity cluster, which is kind of this area over here, we have the playground, a shelter, a restroom, a flexible lawn and flexible play area. So I'll just kind of walk through these elements a bit more in detail. So the playground location, this is more or less the existing playground location, except enlarged and kind of enhanced. One of the real benefits of this is it allows us to reuse the existing playground elements. There is feedback that there are potentially other places in the city whose playground equipment is older and may need to be reused. Also, the playground equipment is in pretty good shape as of now. So, depending on the rollout of the project, how long it takes, there's flexibility there. So the playground equipment can absolutely be a part of the future park design. We heard a lot from parents that protection from the elements is important. And we tried to respond to that by protection from the elements and also places to kind of rest. And so we tried to respond to that partially by providing seating kind of along the edges with vegetation. So can get, sit under the shade of a tree. There has certainly been some feedback from the Parks Board that more intense shade cover would be appreciated. It's I don't think it's something that's typically done in parks here, but that is kind of feedback they receive, that shelter from the wind, or sorry, not from the wind, but like the rain and the sun is something that people are interested in. These seat walls as well, some of the feedback we received is also some people would like fencing, which again is also not something that's typically done in parks in Sherwood, but we've again tried to kind of like frame these spaces. So yeah.
Why?
Well,
Keep the kids from running would be my guess.
yeah, no, that's exactly it. Yeah. Yeah, keeping the kids from running into the street or being kids, I guess. Yeah, exactly. Set them out there, they're out. Also, yeah, what was also introduced as being important for the playground is to be inclusive. For the shelter, again, it's centrally located overlooking the pond. There's synergy with its relationship to the playground. It's not right exactly next to the playground, but it's close. So those two can kind of work together. Moving along, again, the separated restroom building that's kind of in the center of all this activity. For this regraded lawn, this area here is very rocky. And so really, if we want to create some kind of higher quality turf, we have to build up the soil a little bit. And so this is an effort to do that. It's not large enough for formal sports, but it would be an additional place if somebody wants to throw a frisbee or kind of like kick a ball around. This provides additional opportunity for that. And in this area that I'm calling flexible play, this is really kind of a nod towards towards the sports court. So it's kind of in lieu of sports courts. It could be a real flexible space that would allow for informal play and flexibility in the types of activities the park can host. So for example, it could be a decorative paved surface with foursquare. We heard in the surveys that people would be interested in having a place for their kids to like rollerblade or kind of drive around RC cars. People were interested in the kind of smaller scale recreation in terms of like chess tables and ping pong tables. And so this kind of spaces can kind of be kind of a catch-all for that. But also it could be potentially used as a space for some sort of event if somebody wants to set up some tables or something over there. In terms of the pathway network, so we've tried to adapt the pathways from option 3 that were really kind of curvilinear. It's a larger pathway system, so with various loops, so people can kind of do loops throughout the park, and they have options on how they do that. The pathways are all accessible, so less than 5%. That was one of the issues that we had to deal with. And so in some areas, we're kind of like really kind of curving around where the existing paths go straight, but we've managed to confirm that we'd be able to get all the pathways to be ADA accessible. Again, we included this pond pathway, which could be kind of smaller scale, get people down through the vegetation surrounding the pond. And as well, an important part of the accessibility of this park is that there be consistent seating. And so one of the things we've tried to do is provide benches in regular intervals, or places for people to sit in regular intervals along the circulation network. For the pond overlook.
See a question about the benches?
Oh, yeah, of course.
So I've noticed that, well, I think all of them seem to be labeled as covered benches. I'm not sure what the cost difference is, but given all the other covered spaces that already exist, does that seem excessive to anyone besides me?
I was wondering, is that for people that are walking in the rain at the park, or is it like? What are they getting?
What a covered bench looks like.
It still looks like a bus stop. kind of,
Yeah.
But I mean, a nice one, but I'm trying to figure out what the point of that is. If I would rather it be covered by a tree, and if it's gonna be shade.
Yeah, so what we've done is actually we've included a number of covered benches, but we've also included a lot of traditional benches. The traditional benches are oftentimes we're placing them underneath trees so that they do get some sort of soft cover. Whereas the covered bench, which I have examples of what these would look like later on in the presentation, you know, these are more kind of hard, like kind of playful elements. And so in terms of what their purpose is, it really was expressed, you know, in terms of protection against the rain. So if, you know, people are interested in kind of being able to find shelter in the park when it's raining. So it's more about that.
I guess I would say, it seems like there's already a lot of shelter from rain in the park with the, I mean, at least two major areas as well. So I don't know, it just seemed like maybe overkill, but
yeah,
one opinion.
No, that's fair. It's totally fair. Speaking of cover in the park, this area for the for a kind of pond overlook was great. It was very much preferred, and so kind of kept it in the same location. One of the things we did is there's no reason that we have to remove the existing pond lookout, and so we've kind of kept that in the plan. So long as the kind of the structure holds up, then, you know, we didn't want to take that out when it was just fine.
Yeah, so we're preserving existing paths where we can, so we don't have to rebuild them.
Well, where we can, but for the most part, they would need to be replaced. There are certain areas like along the kind of edge over here where we could hold on to them. But generally speaking, there's an existing path that kind of goes all the way through here, and it's just there's no way.
Get that one on the grade, but where we can.
Yeah.
If the paths are still in good working order, okay to tear them out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this plan does deviate from the existing path network pretty significantly, I will say.
I think the area where I would see potentially is along, you mentioned that one obviously, but also on this edge, like. If we look at this, yeah, it's preferred, but potentially, but if the existing network is 3 feet over or 5 feet over, like maybe we just adjust the plan to use it where it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
We are extending a little bit to the south with the bridge. There's a culvert that they're there now that is failing. So
Yeah, the culvert
that is
currently exists right here.
Yeah.
So now I've just got a series of precedent images to express some of the ideas of what this potentially would look like in terms of the types of materials we would use. Oh, actually, one other thing I should mention, the landscaping. So this plan, the pond, as I mentioned last time, is a wetland, and so it needs a 50-foot planting buffer that will be installed to clean water services standards. And that will be triggered anytime there's a land use review. Any work that will require a land use review will trigger this. So this is something that exists around the park. And this is roughly the 50-foot buffer. As well, the plan anticipates the necessary removal of the cottonwood trees around the pond. As they've been noted to be in declining condition. They weren't noted to be currently a hazard, but there's a potential for them to become hazard trees down the line. And as well, there can be a maintenance challenge. And so this plan tries to acknowledge the fact that we need to replace them with something else. So we've included quite a few new.
How many trees?
Sorry?
How many trees?
I'd have to get you, I don't know off the top of my head, but we're probably talking on the order of about 10.
It's just a lot taken out all at once versus just dealing with it as they become hazards.
Yeah.
It just take up like a huge chunk of the tree line disappears all of a sudden.
Yeah, and I think that's a good comment, and I think as this project moves into construction, I think what can happen is I think it would be really good to get an arborist report and to get an official arborist to state like, okay, this tree is maybe more of an imminent hazard, whereas this one is, has some more life left in it. Because I do think in an ideal scenario, you would not remove them all because overnight it becomes like a different park. So,
I did a visit out to the new park in Hillsborough. I was very impressed by their use of local native plants and native trees and everything else that may look different than the current ones we have, but it seemed like we're easier to just maintain. And so is that part of the trees that we would replace it with?
Yeah, so the trees we would replace it with is we would try to, one of the problems with the original design is they leaned very heavily on cottonwoods. And so now they're all roughly the same age and they're roughly the same kind of health. And so we're facing this issue where they all need to be replaced. And so what we would propose is that we provide a diverse palette of trees. Obvious, like very definitely want to be mindful of maintenance requirements because that's an important part of a successful park design. So it really would be kind of a combination of future-proofing the park to make sure we have a variety of species and also ensuring that we're staying away from species that are maintenance challenges. So.
Okay. Well, in addition to that, the ground cover, I mean, I know like when we were walking through it, there were some areas that were obviously, like the regraded lawn that are, maintained by the city and all the other stuff. But then there were certain areas that were essentially wild and made it feel more like, oh, I'm out in the forest kind of. And so is that what that area would be a little bit more like? I know it's it looks like mowed grass, but the reason I'd be in favor of something like that is the maintenance costs long-term and the variety of species. I mean, they have little plaques that essentially say, hey, this looks like wildness, but look how many butterflies there are, look how many, bees there are, look how many, and stuff like that.
We don't want bees. Well, the kids get scared.
Yeah, maybe not bees.
Well, maybe in the other area.
My dog was just bit by a bee or stung by a bee, so I'm anti-bee right now, but.
Just going back on.
So I'm officially in pro B.
Are we taking a vote on bees?
Yeah. Go on the record
Bee
here.
friend.
I was reliving it.
Not the war with bees, harmony with bees.
But going back to
Yes.
my question about, pulling all the trees out, planting with all the new trees, we're just setting ourselves up at a certain point down the road where they're all aging together, so.
Well, they're different, there'll be different varieties, so they'll age at different rates.
Yeah,
But
but I just want to make sure that
I think we should face it.
things should be phased, you're not going through these big resets all the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree 100%. I think that's a responsible path forward for any kind of successful arc. Though, we really want this to be a legacy. So I agree completely. I mean, to your question about the planting, so The wetland plantings would kind of be more anticipated to be more on the wild side.
Right.
You know, really more about kind of habitat. We would try to do things that are less intensive in terms of maintenance, and so they really kind of like take care of themselves. There's an establishment period, obviously, where CSW requires 2 years of maintenance, basically. So, but that's the kind of the intention, is that we would kind of take this more natural kind of planting style, potentially add some stones and everything. And that would really exist around the kind of wetland area. In other places on the site, you know, we would want to potentially kind of use the same language, but not necessarily quite as intensively. And so we could take some of the stones and put them in the more kind of like active areas, and kind of like develop a design language for the site. As well as, you know, as you mentioned, like look at all the butterflies, there's a real opportunity for kind of interpretive signage for this wetland area to really kind of tell people the history about it, because, you know, it's a lot of people don't, you know, it's now used as a retention or detention pond. I always confuse the two, but it's, you know, it's now it's that's what it's used for, but it used to be a part of a creek system. And so, you know, there's a story to be told there. So in terms of the pathways, these are just some precedent images. You know, we want to ensure accessibility and that we provide pathways for everyone. Just an idea of what a potential bridge could be like, again, working with the more natural kind of aesthetic. And, you know, with the pond pathway, just maybe using some more natural materials, maybe moving away from asphalt or concrete and using something that, you know, you can kind of hear under your feet or something.
Wheelchairs and such can.
Yeah, and you know, there's yeah, it would still be accessible. There's materials called like decomposed granite, which you can use a binder, which is actually accessible pavement.
Is it, how kid friendly are these concepts? And the reason I ask that is, you know, we have one school age kid per household in Sherwood, which is way above any other city in the state. So,
Right.
So we'll have a lot more kids in the park than say at Hillsborough does, you like your example.
Well, that park was packed.
Yeah, but I'm just curious, are there issues with these more natural settings with a bunch of kids playing?
Yeah.
Full of flowers.
Well, I suppose, you know, the more heavily it's used, you know, their kids are gonna run through the vegetation at some points. They're gonna stop some plants. You know, I think there's a certain inevitability to that. You know, we would maybe want to be more mindful about the plants just to make sure that there's, you know, fewer things that the kids could get in trouble with. Like there are certain berries, for example, that you would want to plant because they poisonous, but they look delicious. You know, so we'd
Pile of flat rocks right next to the pond, for instance.
sure. Yeah, for sure. You know, I don't.
Kids skipping rocks.
Well, we have to replenish it.
What are
Yeah.
anti-bees?
What are you, anti-skipping rocks?
No, I mean.
Not if kids know how to skip rocks.
I know, but what I'm saying is, you know, if you have these areas, especially around the swell that you want to protect. I mean,
Yes.
And the kids are just gonna go down. There's no way out.
Totally.
I don't know, we had a problem, was it cinder or decomposed granite up at Snyder that we had to replace with the path because it kept getting washed out?
Yeah, we did. Yes, because it was on a hillside.
Yeah, so I would just be careful on that. I mean, yes, we would love to have more natural things, but I also don't want to pay for a path twice.
Yeah, so fair. Yeah.
And one other weird question that I've never thought before though,
Sure.
is our Parks Department, do we test the pond for pond health or like, are there fish in there? Are there algae blooms?
It's an intermittent pond, so it doesn't always have water.
Okay,
It will dry out, so.
You know, like it's a large swale.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, so there's no wildlife that lives there permanently, so.
Is that one tentatively connected to as a storm, kind of a wildlife storm facility?
It was put in as a detention, so.
Yeah, which is why those trees were selected. And
Exactly.
going forward, will it continue to be play that role to an extent, or?
Correct.
Yes.
In terms of furnishings, just an example of some of the types of furnishings. So, you know, some more traditional benches. Here's an idea of kind of a playful idea of what these covered benches could be. You know, maybe you wouldn't want to put these everywhere, but maybe there are some kind of key moments where this could be kind of a fun, playful feature. Yeah, and there are places on the site where you actually do get pretty good views, you know, like it's sort of on the hill and you get kind of good views. And so I can see there being real opportunities with something like this to kind of really frame the view. You know, on the play area, again, talking about potentially using benches as kind of a delineator of the edges of the park and providing places for people to sit with kind of vegetation in the background or trees or what have you to kind of give some shelter. And then, yeah, people expressed an interest in having a drinking fountain. And there was quite a wide support in the idea of something like ping pong or tables with chess. So they, you know,
That Hillsborough Park has ping pong, it also has, cornhole, permanent
Mhm.
outdoor ones, and, one other one, but the nice thing about that was they had a rec center right next to it that you could check out stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to bring your own, that's the only problem with this.
Yeah, you have to bring your own. And with the chess tables, it's like,
Yeah.
it serves as a table when it's not chess.
Yeah.
But yeah, the ping pong, it's kind of,
That
it is what
serves
it
as a
is.
picnic table without a
Yeah.
ping pong ball, you know, so.
Yeah.
So I'll do a quick time check.
Yeah.
We can run a little bit over here, but how much more you got?
Not much.
Okay, good.
And I can be pretty quick about it. So in terms of the structures, so the picnic shelter, just some ideas of what the picnic shelter could potentially look like for the pond overlook. This image at the top was really the one that people really seemed to love. Keeping the existing, this is just another example. And then, so just some examples of some restrooms. In terms of the playground, inclusivity was important to people. The idea of nature play was popular. Play for all ages. People wanted to make sure there were areas for different age groups and like potentially have them kind of sectioned out. And also kind of preserving the existing play structure, as well as, again, finding opportunities to bring in the same kind of like stone language that we've used elsewhere in the park. For the play area, these are some precedent images of just kind of what the more informal, some ideas of what this informal play area could be. You know, we could do some kind of like fun pavement areas and, you know, just really kind of get playful with this and just provide places for people to kind of be informal with their play. And, you know, we've performed a first stab at a cost estimate based on this. And so these are kind of our preliminary numbers here, just to kind of get a sense of what we're looking at here. So I believe in the master plan, it said 2.2 million. So, you know, we've added,
How long ago that?
21.
yeah,
That's
so,
probably pretty accurate then.
yes. Yeah, so we're at 2.4, but at this stage, we've added on quite a few contingencies and what have you. So, you know, we threw out 3.38 million.
It would be nice to see what, compared to what we have now, this is a baseline, like what a 5-year cost of ownership looks like. Because like, for instance, you mentioned clean water services will require 2 years of maintenance, specialized maintenance, I'm assuming. You know, just kind of what that looks like over time, not just the capital.
Would that plan also include, hey, what if we, you know, the second or third year put in the covered park or the pond overlook instead of doing it all at once, right? I mean, do we have to do this all in the same fiscal year, or can we say, hey, this will be a phase thing, or is there a worry that we wouldn't ever get it done?
My vote is get it done because it's only gonna get more expensive, but that's a valid question.
Yeah, but
I think there's some quick wins with this
Yeah.
park, especially around the actual pond itself, with the plantings and some other things. It's kind of a quick
You could
win.
phase.
You could
Yeah.
actually phase it but there's some quick wins here.
yeah, well, I think the grading and the paths and, you know, the play area, keeping the one we have if it's not road, you know, but again, you can't grade something after you put a building on it, right? So we'd have to do that ahead of time. Anyway,
Yeah.
it feels like there might be some things where we say,
Yeah, I could definitely see a path towards phasing. Like there are discrete elements that I think if you know, if necessary, you could definitely come up with something. So,
Yeah,
So.
All right,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Dan?
From the picnic area down to the pond pathway, is there any plan of having trails closer to the picnic area to get down to that trail system?
Kind of like through here.
Grading
Yeah.
too steep for that.
Well, the grading's too steep to be accessible.
Okay.
So we could,
As long as there's a way down there, you could have.
yeah, I mean, but yeah, on the previous concept, for example, we had kind of like a stone step down here. It's steep. I would have to look at what the exact grades are, but it's not
Maybe do
impossible.
more like a
Yeah.
switchback trail or something through there, or a diagonal one even potentially.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly, it's not impossible. Like, it's totally
As long as there's-
reasonable.
An accessible path for those who need accessibility.
And then my other comment was for the sun sail type of thing for the playground. Once we put those up at the other parks in the area, they've been used so much more by having that sun shelter. And so if there's a way to incorporate something like that into this park as well, that matches the design of what you're going for, yeah, I think that would be really helpful for that area.
We have sun sails up.
Front Park, Stella Olson.
Question?
Parks is on
I do one more comment. Can you go back to the shelter pictures? I agree that pond overlay, or which one was the popular one? That one?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, but for the other shelter, the bigger shelter, yeah. I'm really, given all the rain, having something that has eaves on both sides, it helps protect you from, like the one on top there,
Yeah.
in a given rainy day in Oregon, half of that's gonna get rain underneath, right?
Oh, yeah.
Having something that has those eaves on both sides to give it more protection.
No, that's helpful. That's good feedback.
So, which are our next steps? I'm sorry.
No, too specific.
For our next steps.
We generally like the design.
Mhm, yeah.
We're gonna have our open house on the 29th. Just to share, I guess we can refine
Yeah,
the comments that we have here.
yeah, for sure. The intent is to present it to the public, and assuming, there isn't a huge backlash, then, we intend to move forward with this design and wrap up the master plan document with kind of a summary of all the information we've received. So,
And there is, you were saying that there's some grant funding through Oregon State Parks and Rec that comes out in April.
yes,
So this would be a good time for having this completed, and possibly pursuing some of those grants.
So when the state comes out, that's the deadlines to apply or.
So, yes, and then we're in
Yeah.
July.
yeah, and the deadline for submission is April 1st, and they usually release them in July.
So, Mayor, I'll go ahead.
Can we add this to our lobbying list?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
I'll include it. So I would expect probably something back, October, early November for council to approve the park master plan. And then it'll go on a shelf until we get some funding or the council wants to move forward. That was the deal.
Awesome.
Great. Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Great presentation. All right, well, we will close out our 5:30 work session and everybody need a break or
Yeah.
Here.
And we will go ahead and jump into our URA board of directors work session. We have a different Zoom for that.
No, it's all the same.
It's on site.
Which one are we doing?
Yeah. I'd never been there until the summer. Whenever
Yes.
one time. And it's really cool, but yeah, you definitely see it needs a major.
Okay, folks, let's keep it going. We're gonna go ahead, hey guys. We're gonna go ahead and get our URA board meeting, work session, I should say, call to order. We have two items for tonight, Ice Age Drive funding and URA financing update. David, good going.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So a little bit about ICH Drive funding. I want to talk a little bit about the URA and kind of the current status. Currently, as we've talked about during the budget committee meetings, the URA has performed better than originally expected when it was created back in 2021. What does that mean? The TIF revenue has exceeded its original expectations. When you look at the kind of the plan that was originally put together, we're about a year and a half ahead of schedule than where we thought we'd be. It is forecasted to experience strong growth. That of course is all industrial development dependent, but it is forecasted to experience strong growth. But we know, and we've talked about this, the funding for additional capital projects within the URA is currently limited. And it's not because it's not performing well, it's just, we've utilized a lot of the resources for various projects, whether it's the bridge, Festival Plaza, and even some of broadband that we've utilized those funds for.
And just for people listening, I did just make sure people understand that, because I think our URA will raise 84 million approximately over the life of the URA. But for access to that money, you either bond against it or collect it, and that takes time.
Yeah, it does take time.
When interest rates are really, really low, we can go bond against it and accelerate it. And when they're high, sometimes.
Yeah, originally, when we took out the loan back in 2021, the interest rate was 2.5%, I would say, and we're earning 5.3% on the money right now that's in the bank. So we're covering our interest costs. So there's two kind of funding options that I've put together because we know the URA is limited on its borrowing ability right now. So I'm kind of looking at this more from kind of the city's perspective. We've been on a few different phone calls with Business Oregon. They do have what they call the Special Public Works Fund. This was utilized with the original URA that has since closed, but our first URA here, we did utilize this loan fund. But then a second option is it could be a combination. We could go for the Business Oregon Special Public Works Fund loan, but then also use of some existing city reserves. And what I mean by reserves is we have restricted pots of money in certain funds that can only be utilized for whether it's water, infrastructure, storm, sewer. So that's what I mean by city reserves. I'm not talking about general fund reserves or anything like that.
But that would be a scenario where we pay it back over time. So
Yeah.
basically taking a loan out.
Urban renewal would still pay that back.
Yes.
Anything that we use the reserves, we get paid back with interest from the urban renewal district when it caught up.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a general comment.
And the business, and with the special loan, same deal. Business Oregon loan, we would take it out and they would get repaid eventually by the urban renewal district.
Yeah, and I know when we talked about, like, for example, like the bridge in that project, there are some IGAs that we need to get set up between the two entities in terms of structure.
Without, I just want to make sure people, especially the listening, understand. I mean, we have all these different ways of financing it.
Mhm.
Go after a Business Oregon loan, we can take a loan out against ourselves, against different funds, we can go bond against future revenue, TIF revenue in the URA. It's just a matter of which makes more sense financially.
Yeah, we can go out and get, but like I said, bonds, that's a little more expensive than the Business Oregon option.
Right.
And like I said, it's a loan through Business Oregon. It does provide low cost financing to municipalities such as cities. And the one thing for facilities essential to industrial growth and job creation, which that is what the TEA is there for. And those are two of council's goals. And one thing that's attractive about these loans too, it has terms up to 30 years. Normally when you go out on the bond market, 30 years, yeah, you can see those loans, but they don't like to, it's not really an option that's always available, but Business Oregon does go up to 30 years, which is nice. And when this URA was created, when we were on the phone with the consultants, we did not put a life to this URA. So if we took out a 30-year loan, I mean, we'd expect to probably pay it off sooner than that, but it does give us the flexibility to take out a 30-year loan.
What's the interest rate say? I know it's a snapshot, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I want to say it's around 3. I mean, currently right now rates are, I don't want to say they're a little bit higher, just the way the economy is right now. But it was surprising when we were on the phone to them. Do you remember? It's like in the 3 range, I think is what I recall.
Right now, 3 range.
Yeah, this is through the state of Oregon though,
I
yeah,
got it. Good.
yeah. The one drawback, they do have a max funding loan amount of 10 million, but when we were on the phone with them in June, there are ways that we could take out multiple loans with them to fund this project.
The total, like, because we can use our 3 million in federal funds as a match.
Well, right now we have estimated about $17.5 million remaining to build this road. That does factor in the $3 billion in the federal grant. Yeah, would you say about 20 million is the total cost? Yeah,
For Ice Age Drive.
for Ice Age Drive.
How
So-
long is Ice Age Drive?
1 mile is it?
Jeez.
20 million a mile.
Great. That's just crazy.
Yeah.
How much does it cost? I don't want to be oversneaky, but if a private developer was building that road in a subdivision, how much would it cost them? Less. Probably a lot less. I mean,
Can we temporarily turn it over to a private entity, you know?
yeah,
I mean, they do that in Eugene all the time, and at Nike too.
that's a strategy we should look at, because if we get a private developer to look at it.
We have,
Build it.
we have remnant land to sell.
Yeah, it's in David's calculations. When he,
If that's, if that number, the estimated sales price,
when he shows you the,
Option 2.
option.
okay.
So option 1 is, do we just take out the full amount? $17.5 million, just to build the road. But then there's option 2 of using a combination of a business Oregon loan, use of existing reserves. We have 2 pieces of property over there in the TEA that we can sell, where there, right now, there's a value range of anywhere between 2.6 to 3.3 million, but we know if the road is built, that land becomes even more valuable.
Great. You definitely don't want to sell it until after the road's done
Yes.
or nearly done.
Yes. And when I said, like I said earlier, the use of existing reserve balances, that's in the street fund, the water, storm, sewer, all those kind of restricted dollars.
Those would be low.
Specific for this kind of development.
Didn't we already kind of tap out the water? We tapped out one of them for the bridge.
We authorize the use of it, we have.
Up to,
Right, no, I know, but it's accounted for, that we've already.
yeah, and in this, what is it, the estimated cost for water infrastructure, it was about $1.1 million out in the TEA. So there's various pots of money that we can utilize to build this infrastructure. So I'm not talking about borrowing $5-10 million, because the water fund does not have that.
Right, I just don't want to double count and say, hey, we promised some to the bridge. And that's not gonna be spent for 2 or 3 years, but we're now gonna promise some of it to here.
That's not good.
No, I'm not.
That's what it, okay,
Yeah, no. So when I was taking a look at the budget, I believe the water capital fund had reserves of a little over $15 million. That was in the budget document. So we were looking at borrowing up to 12 million.
right, but then some of that is for water capital projects, right? You know what I mean, like maybe we have to have a separate meeting
So
where,
our master plans were done.
yeah,
All our master plans. TEA was figured into some of those. So those SDCs that David's talking about is in the plan, where the bridge at first.
Yeah.
Wasn't in the plan until we borrowed. We still did it right, but these utilities would be some of the stuff that's already planned for in the master plans.
okay.
Same with storm, same with sewer.
The sewer's the one that's gonna have to use
Yeah.
it for the URA.
And the one point I wanted to make, you know, the drawback when you start using those reserves or those restricted dollars for, say, this Ice Age Drive project, it could delay some other projects that are on the capital, the CIP plan. So that's one of the drawbacks. That's why when I was taking a look at maybe option 1 might be the better route, so we can continue with those other capital projects, but fund Ice Age Drive fully, because we know Ice Age Drive is vital to that growth in the URA growth development, which brings in those tax dollars, which allows us to continue on with other projects.
Domino effect, isn't it?
So have we done an analysis of you know, because Schnitzer just applied for phase two, right? That was in the works. Have you done an analysis of what those remaining interior lots, you know, that this will connect, you know, get over to the new treatment plant, and what the impact of that is for future revenue versus. I'm just wondering, yes, you're right, it's gonna generate revenue, but a lot of it we're already gonna get, because these are projects that are already underway, at least on this side of Ice Age Drive and getting out there. We wanna finish it, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm also, you know, I was also thinking these price tags, you know, if we could find a developer who was part of their project to extend the road.
Yeah.
Right, in exchange for credits or whatever, potentially could be a lot cheaper than us just going ahead and getting it all done up front.
Yeah, and I know when Craig, this is a presentation you provided to council, I think it was back in 2022, so a few years ago. Just talking about the potential revenue that this project could create with development, and this is more in terms of revenue, not tax revenue, because that really depends on what size building and so forth. But in terms of whether it's a storm, TDT, SDCs, it had a range anywhere between $9 million to $16 million in revenue.
What time period?
I'd say, do you recall?
It'd be great if that's annual.
Yeah, no.
This is just funds coming back in from the developer.
That's when fully built out.
It's
Yeah.
hard to,
All the fees and.
the fees
Yeah.
and stuff.
Once you collect all the SDCs, you're getting to
And it's
that.
very hard to like not knowing what's gonna go in there for water and because water's off a meter size. SDCs and the SDCs off of sanitaries EDUs, so it's hard to.
So to sum it all out, I mean, assuming we do it ourselves, 17 million, but you're gonna have, a lot of that's gonna be offset by the fees that get charged when those property come in, and that's that 9 to 10 million. We have the 3 million from.
The federal government.
From the federal government, so. You know, so long-term overall, we have a $4 million deficit.
Which then doesn't even account for the accelerated TLT growth.
That's right.
Or TFT.
TIF grant.
Hold on,
TIF
Tip, hold on
grant.
though. So let's say I had a $17 million bill here and I gave it to you to pay for this project.
Mhm.
Then we get the STCs that come in. Where do those STCs normally go if they're not going to pay off this?
They are
They,
going to pay off this.
Oh, I know, but
That's where
what-
they would normally go.
No.
That's what, yeah.
They go to us, they go,
I spend 17 million to pave a road, right? And build it out.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say we had the cash on hand to do that.
you get
Now,
a
all of
dedicated
these
road fund.
companies are coming and developing their land and paying the SDCs. Where would that money
Goes to a transportation
Fund.
SD fund.
Pays
That's
to pay
only
for
for
it.
transportation.
It's just replenishing the money that was paid up front.
That's the whole.
That's the whole point of
If
SDCs.
you didn't have the URA, let's just say, and you were going to fund this project, you would fund it out of SDCs, out of your reserves to build the road. And that money is going to come back into those reserves. If
Yeah.
I'm understanding.
Yeah, I don't.
So there is the argument, maybe this is what you're pointing at. That the urban renewal district could build this road and through tip money pay it back. Then the transportation SDCs that all the developers that go in there, they'll be paying to the city and the county. And that's getting spanked, then you could spend that on a different road project.
Yeah, but what you're really doing there is you using URA funds to do the road as opposed to doing SDCs. I mean, you're just making choices of where you pay for it. Yeah.
Yep.
But if you're borrowing the money from the SDC funds in the first place, it's all just a big circle.
Yes, right.
It's a big.
And that's, yes, and that's your point. If we're using some. It's choices, there's lots of ways of choices, but from my perspective. Build it.
and the one thing, when you look at, if we were to sell those two properties in the URA, there's one of two ways you can handle it. Assist in, well, we're already gonna have the road built because we want to build the road before we sell those properties to get the highest dollar value. But you could put that money back into the URA, which lowers what you've spent so far. So you can take that money and spend it on other projects and get some other projects going. Or you can look at paying back.
And from a. Oversight perspective, that's what you should do. You know, if you bought property in the urban renewal district with urban renewal dollars,
Yep, it needs to go.
those the proceeds of the sale of that property should go to the rental district. to
Yep.
Pay off this project or to help pay another project.
Exactly.
But if it goes up for sale, does that sweeten the deal for getting a private developer to put in that road? If we say, hey, we'll sell you these pieces of property and we'll knock $1 million off if you put in the road?
They're gonna take $1 million discount to put in a $17 million road,
No.
$12 million road, private.
Again,
It's a fair question.
whatever the numbers are, does it sweeten the deal so get it's road in there for half the price?
It's an interesting conundrum, because if you sell them now without the road, they're not worth as much. If you build the road yourself at a premium, because it probably costs us 30% more to do it, does the enhanced value of that property cover the cost of doing it yourself versus having?
Well, that's why I've got a smart guy who can run the numbers.
Those are some of the.
We-
I have you all
The
fooled.
city is not a sophisticated organization when it comes to trying to do those kind of deals, in my opinion. Guesstimating the opportunity by having it built by a private developer and putting a land, sell some land in the deal. I've either hired, some experts, but even then, it's my perspective, we build it, then we sell the stuff, and so it's single transaction. When you try to combine things, you're up for criticism, you open yourself up for criticism. Potentially.
But we also have to develop new capabilities that we don't currently have expertise in, which can go different ways.
Good point, Lex.
And so kind of the next steps, if you're all in favor of us moving forward with starting to look at the loan options, is we got to start working with Business Oregon to look at funding options, so we can kind of come back with various loan packages to city council. Could be one, the full amount, or is it the kind of the combination of using some of the reserves and a loan? But that's.
Using some of our reserves that we're paying ourselves back the interest. But the downside is if we use our reserves.
Less flexibility.
and then something comes up.
Because you're relying on that future development, and that's always a little bit of a risk, because when will that development occur?
Is there a way to get estimated valuations of the properties we own? Assuming the road goes in, right? We know what they're worth now. If a road was there, we know if we have a guesstimate of what they might be worth, or, then we can sell them ahead of time at that price, right? Then somebody might want to buy them or close to that price.
Yeah, and I think we spent a little about 2.6, 2.7 million, for those two pieces of property. And it looks like back in 2012, there was an estimate of high value, 3.3 million, but that was a couple years ago. So yeah, we'd have to work with someone to see potentially what the value could be.
You actually need to use the ground under construction for us.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
but that's a great idea.
Yeah.
If we didn't have to.
Right, I think to the former mayor's point, it would not make sense to sell them at current value. It would only make sense to sell them at post-road value, but if everyone knows the road's going in, you might be able to get post-road value early, is my point. Yeah. So
Good, yeah.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
So I'd be more comfortable, I feel like I'm very dense to this, I may have to just schedule a meeting with just you to talk through this, because it feels like there's not really a downside here, but I also have heard, well, there's opportunity costs, right? The sewers blow up in Old Town and we don't have the money to do a big sewer upgrade or whatever, because we've leveraged ourselves too much against those funds or whatever, but like, I need to know what I'm giving up in order to spend that money, because I would love to have that higher value land, I'd love to have the tax revenue, but I also know that besides the ugliness of the building in Old Town, the second thing I hear about is why are we putting more industrial land in instead of getting parkland or getting, you know what I mean? Like, the citizens don't really, nobody cares
for those parks.
I understand, but nobody really cares about Ice Age Drive, right? They're not gonna be like, oh, yes, you finally put an Ice Age Drive, you know what I mean? Like, and so I wanna know, okay, well, what am I saying no to be able to say yes to that? Cause I think that that is a top priority, but I gotta figure out what we're saying no to, because so far it sounds like, well, we're not really saying no to anything, but we have to be saying no to something.
So the sewer fund, we're never gonna borrow money out of the sewer fund. That's the one that hurts. That's why we're going after federal dollars constantly.
Yeah.
The water fund, I mean, what you're getting at, I mean, Craig has, the CIP has all of those projects laid
Yeah.
out over the next 30 years, so it's all programmed out. So it's pretty easy to look into it and say, if I borrow this much, I know I'm gonna get paid back over this amount of time. You know, just how far does that set me back or does it set me back? Because
Yeah.
that's what you want.
And one thing about I know the storm and water fund, I worked with Craig this year. You know, those operation, I don't want to say operate because the water fund is all one fund, but you got the operation side, you got the capital side. That operation side and both the storm and water funds are getting pretty high. So we're starting for the next few years, moving 50% of the revenue over to the capital side. Put money away for capital projects because we can't have the operational balance be so high. You know, there's restrictions
Yeah.
that accounting standards say you can't have more than a year's worth of operating revenue to cover expenses in that operation side. So we're just getting the money moved over.
But does this, so Bruce, this might be a question for you. I know we've got a work session later on that, but does this mean that we won't be able to do some of the, you know, facade improvements or Main Street stuff or whatever if we don't have money?
Well, I think
I know it's different budgets, but they're all kind of moving around here. That's why I don't understand. What's that? Yeah, Bruce, go ahead.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Okay.
Yeah, I see the question.
So we're gonna be coming back, I think it's September 17th,
Right.
whatever that date is, to talk about target industries.
Yeah.
And talking about what should be the target industries for the city that are the higher paying jobs. And from that, the discussion, including the types of incentives that some other cities are using for target industries, the higher paying jobs. The downtown plan itself is going to separately, that's getting started pretty soon, in fact, very soon, we just signed the contract today. Is going to look at what kind of incentives may be needed in the Main Street area. So there are really two different kinds of businesses we're talking about.
because we have target businesses versus target industries.
Right, but in terms of what impacts the everyday Sherwood citizen, the small business or the types of business that are brought in impacts them more than more warehouse space or storage.
They think.
You know what I mean? I know that it's important for leveling the tax base.
It's also the cheapest, by the way.
Right, I'm just, that's what I'm wondering, if we're saying, hey, fantastic, we get these great reports back and all this stuff, but we're dry because we've borrowed against the water too much, you know what I mean? Like, I need to know what I'm giving up.
Yeah.
Not saying we're in a debate.
Work with staff and get that.
The next meeting, you're gonna hear
Okay,
that.
well, perfect,
We're doing this first to not look at those numbers first.
okay, great. Okay, all right, I withdraw my concern. Hold it in abeyance.
You need more information.
Yeah.
Let's get together. Yeah.
Okay, all right,
I understand what you're saying,
Okay.
Taylor, for sure.
okay.
No problem with that. All right, you want to move on to are we good on this one or do you have any more?
I don't have anything more. It's because my next slide was gonna be questions.
Craig, what would you like to do?
Well, I think next steps would be, if you guys are interested, we start working with seeing what the Public Works Fund could help us out with, as well as our reserves, so we're not doing everything for loans. And then bring something back to you to have a Ice Age Drive, everything's working together with the state, everything's going perfect right now. If everything continues to go well, we should be able to bid that job in January, early February. And it takes probably 4 to 6 months to go through the loan process. So we really, if this is something council wants to do,
Make it on.
we need to actually move forward and find out
Without
what the rates and all that stuff are like.
Without knowing all the numbers, I mean, if we can get an OBO loan, a business Oregon loan, at those kind of rates, that's in my mind, pretty favorable because we don't have that opportunity in every other category of spending.
And it preserves the flexibility.
And the nice thing about those business Oregon loans, they're revolving loans. So it's not, you're not getting the money all up front and paying,
So you just borrow against.
borrow as
line
you
of
use
credit,
it.
basically.
Yeah, it's basically like it.
Equity.
Yep.
And we received a grant or money for the Ice Age Drive, right?
Through
If we don't move forward, that we lose that money.
Lose that money.
So it's really important that we figure this out.
I think that comes up if we're not under construction or it's not completed by mid-26 or fall of 26, I think is the
But
requirement.
isn't that also a requirement on the brownfield cleanup?
4
and-
years, 4 years.
Yeah, but so do we have, I know, but do we have enough money to build the public?
We're talking about next.
Yeah.
Okay, good, all right. Yeah, I know, I saw that, but I'm just, because we have these in isolation, I'm worried that we're not.
Well, I think, I mean, hindsight.
Isolation in your brain. Some of us are not.
In hindsight, we should have probably done the other presentation first and then come to this, but.
The engine of the urban renewal district is the Tonkin preliminary. And so if you do not build this road, you prevent doing future projects.
We feel like there's
Do this and well, yes, there is a perceived delay in other projects in the urban renewal plan. Really, there isn't.
But our revenue will also be delayed. Do you see that there's one clear path here for funding, or is there two good options?
I'd say that there's two good options,
Okay.
but you know, I did my recommendation, let's go for the full amount, but we as a staff really gotta look at what potential city projects could be delayed if we utilize.
I think
some
it
of
would be
those.
great to, if you came back with your option A and option B and said, here's option A, here's exactly what the numbers would look like and what funds would be effective and how, what projects might be affected. Here's option B, same thing, and then we can say, go with A, go with B.
And that's what
It's possible that the state revolving fund, we would not be successful with an application for $10 million loan. Yeah,
And that was the way I was looking, to get 10 and then go the other route for the other 10.
but if we got 2 loans from the state, and if we then, as we did more analysis, didn't need all of the 2 loans because we used other resources, we don't have to take the full loan amount, right?
Correct. Okay.
So I'd love to have 2 loans approved in our pocket to provide.
That's a great point, because we don't have to use it.
Any other questions?
So we'll get to work on some packages and start working with this.
C option, whatever, use your best judgment on what those options are based on what you're seeing in the world.
Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. So now we're gonna talk about the URA financing update.
I'm not gonna bring Nick, you remember working with Nick when the original URA plan was created back in 2001?
That's probably needed on a whiteboard. Which is like, sorry, helps.
Numbers.
No, I get it, but I feel like we pulled some numbers 5 times and I want.
You need like a flow chart, huh?
I'd like to see it like a regular balance sheet. Know where all these buckets are.
Flow chart.
How you doing?
Good. Welcome back. Thank you. So it's good to be back here. I've definitely been in this room before, presenting to many familiar faces here as we put together the original plan several years ago. And it is always nice to come back to a place and see that the financial performance is exceeding what we had originally projected, as is the case here.
Yeah,
So
if I remember, you thought we were being a little aggressive.
they were aggressive assumptions. Yeah, you guys, which just goes to show how successful your urban renewal area has been. You know, I do this work all over multiple states, and the growth you're seeing here is really top notch. It's very hard to find other more successful examples than what you guys are doing here.
Yeah, we're
So
doubling the rate in Washington County right now.
absolutely, yeah, it's off the charts. So
Our first one performed off the chart, but then this one's in warp speed.
yeah, absolutely. So with that, you know, having that extra growth, beating the expectations means that there's lots of desire to fund projects in the areas. And it means we want to have an updated financial forecast. So that's what we did. We updated the financial forecast for this upcoming 5-year period. Just kind of for broader context, when we're looking at the growth here, it's a permanent rate plan. So the only tax revenue or tax rates that are involved are the permanent rate levies. Those don't change. So your tax rates are going to stay the same over this period. In order to get more TIF, you need to have more growth in assessed value. And that growth in assessed value can come from appreciation or can come from new construction. But in Oregon's property tax system, that appreciation is limited to 3% growth per year. And so if you're not getting new construction, you're gonna just be getting that humble 3% per year. And it actually winds up being a little less than 3% because as we mentioned in the details of this slide, most of the property is real property, land and buildings, but some of it's manufactured homes, some of it's personal property, machinery and equipment value, and then utility property like the cell phone towers and cable lines. And those behave a little bit differently, those non-traditional property types, and they tend to lag behind that 3% growth. So we assume no change over the 5-year period for those property types. So really what we're looking at is that growth from new construction. And with new construction, we worked with city staff to get a list of all the known buildings that are planned to occur in this area over the next few years. These are all projects that are moving forward. They've got permits that have been pulled. Some of them showing construction dates in 2024, maybe projects that have already wrapped up or are close to wrapping up at this point in time. Staff would be the ones that know the details of what these projects are and where they are. I just know the numbers and how they plug into our spreadsheets. But you're looking at $190 million of improvement values for known projects in this area that are planned to be finishing construction this year and then into the next 2 years. That's a very large, healthy amount of value in an urban renewal area this size. It does take a couple more years usually for that value to come onto the tax roll. So you see, it's fantastic that you've got all this value that's the projects are finishing today. They're having ribbon cutting ceremonies, but you're not actually going to get the tax benefits from that until a couple more Octobers from now, after the assessor has had a chance to work it through their system and get those bills sent out. And then also the difference between those last two columns is important to point out. $190 million is the estimated cost of construction, but the actual taxable value when it comes on the tax roll is estimated at 114 million. And that's just due to Oregon's wonky property tax system, where we give every project that gets built a massive tax cut right out of the gate. That becomes its taxable value, and then it can only grow from 3% from that point forward. You go back in time 20 years, and the amount of value per dollar of new construction that was treated as taxable was a much higher ratio. You'd have new construction come on and you'd be getting 75, 85 cents on the dollar. Now you're looking at more like 50 cents on the dollar for new construction that turns into taxable value. But still, $114 million of new taxable value in the area is very significant. This gets into the arithmetic of how all those different pieces add up to the total growth in assessed value. That final column on the right is the one we care about most, where in the fiscal year we just wrapped up, the area had $287 million of assessed value. And over the next 5 years, we project that to increase to $462 million. Not quite doubling, but pretty significant growth in a 5-year period. Most of that is coming from the new construction. You can see for that first clump of properties, the utility, manufactured, personal, we're holding that flat. And then we just have 3% growth from appreciation on the existing property base here. That is non-trivial, but that new construction is really what props this area up. And you can see that new construction drops to 0 in the 5th year of our forecast. That doesn't mean the area is done with all of its construction. It means this is a conservative forecast. We're only looking at projects that are in the pipeline right now, that have pulled permits right now. And there just isn't something that's pulled a permit that's waiting 4 more years to develop. So hopefully if you do an updated analysis 2-3 years from now, you'd have a whole new crop of permits in the area and more projects to fill in these later years to show that continued new construction is ongoing.
I mean, even just at the pace, 40, 37, 47, 40, 48, 40-year average, you're now pushing 500.
Yep, exactly.
2029, assuming you get another 40 million, so. It's great.
Looking at the percent change, the percent change in value, this first year 3% because we didn't know of any projects that were going to come onto the tax roll this upcoming October. There may actually be some, especially because projects aren't all black and white. Assessors will sometimes put a project that's partially complete on the tax roll. So a month or 2 from now when the tax roll comes out, I would not be surprised that the total value is actually more than the 295.5 that we have listed there. But then 17%, 14%, 15% per year, that's very, very strong growth in assessed value. I'd say statewide, you're looking at trends that are closer to 4.5% growth in assessed value per year. So you're just absolutely, beating the statewide average. When you have strong growth in assessed value, you see even stronger growth in TIF revenue as a percent basis. If I'm looking at this brick wall here, let's say you've got a stack of bricks, 10 bricks high, and you draw a line there, and that's your frozen base. You add one more brick above that line. You've increased the total height of that wall by 10%, but you've increased the increment of that wall infinitely. Went from 0 to 1. You add another brick, and now again, you've increased the total height of the wall by a little less than 10%, but you've increased that increment value by 100%. So early on, the strong growth in assessed value leads to these absolutely massive percent increases in your annual tax revenues. And so we see over this 5-year period, going from a little over $1 million today to over $3 million 5 years from now, nearly tripling your annual cash flow over that 5-year period. So very strong growth again. So then we say, okay, with that cash flow, what can we afford? What projects are we trying to fund in the area? And so staff provided us with a list of what are sort of the desired projects, the capital projects that we know the city's interested in funding at this point in time, and what the total cost of all those projects are. And so, going back to that previous conversation, kind of looking holistically at all the different options that are out there on the table for funding projects today. And you can see some big ticket items there: the pedestrian bridge, Ice Age Drive, Public Works Facility, Cedar Creek Trail undercrossing. Those 4 alone get you to almost $100 million. And then the other projects on the list as well, measured in millions, not in smaller dollar amounts. Through this most recent fiscal year that we finished, a portion of these projects have already been funded, about $12 million. So that leaves just over $100 million of remaining costs for the projects on the list there.
Do these already take into consideration the $5 million we're gonna get from EPA for the tannery?
Nope. This is just what's been
Just the
funded
cost.
last year. Yep.
Okay.
So we'll have a slide, a couple slides more from now that does
Okay.
bring that in.
Oh, wait.
So then this looks at the next 5-year period and what sources we think are going to be available to help pay for those projects. But not every one of these dollars is going to be able to go directly into those projects, because you do have administrative costs of the Urban Renewal Agency, and there's debt service expenditures that are going to be quite significant. So you're going to be spending dollars on debt rather than on the upfront projects. But what we're looking at here, you see the middle line item is your TIF revenue, going from 1.1 million up to 3.2 million. We've got your beginning fund balance. So the urban renewal area is already carrying over $6 million of funds into this current fiscal year. Interest earnings, there's going to be pretty healthy interest earnings in this current year because you have such a big fund balance. But if you spend all those funds in the next couple of years, your interest earnings are going to dwindle to a negligible amount. We're estimating a $12 million bond loan proceed. This would be the city's water program loaning funds to the urban renewal area. 10-year repayment with 5% interest, give or take. And then we've got those grants over the next 3 years, which are grants earmarked to specific projects for the tannery, for the pedestrian bridge, for Ice Age Drive. But 12 million in grants. This is also another great success of your urban renewal area. Urban renewal areas work best when you can use that local source that you've identified, your own increment revenue, to leverage outside state and federal grants. They almost always want to see a local match. And for you to be able to say, well, we'll put in our TIF dollars if you provide those grant funds, and it's a really successful strategy for bringing more money into your community and funding these projects. Yeah, exactly. So all told, $42 million of revenues and really, grants, the proposed borrowing and TIF funds would be the 3 biggest, with your beginning fund balance is a very sizable portion as well.
I just want to make sure, just for context, like for instance, the $12 million for the bridge. That's assuming we use it all. This is like a worst case, because we may not use it all.
Right, exactly. Yep. So then what would those funds be spent on? So $42 million of revenue on the last slide, $42 million of expenditures here. You can kind of ignore the final right column. Typically, if we were looking at a longer time frame or had more of these dollars that were being spent in the later years, we'd want to understand the impact of inflation, because that certainly is going to take a bite out of your purchasing power. here, we're looking at a relatively short time frame, and most of these expenditures are anticipated to happen over the next couple of years. So there's not much of an inflationary impact here. So those last two columns, the nominal expenditures over time and the constant expenditures in today's dollars, they're almost identical, not much of a loss in purchasing power.
So is this where the $5 million EPA grant shows up?
Yeah, so that's embedded in these numbers here for each of those individual capital projects. Yeah, so the funds are shown there, but the grant funding is baked into these expenditure numbers.
Okay, okay, on an overall basis,
Right.
not on a line. item basis.
Well, they are embedded in there, you know, but on this slide, you just have to know, by seeing that the totals add up, 42 million on each slide, you can see that this level of expenditure is only possible with the grant dollars that are shown on the previous.
So like we're
The first
showing,
slide was revenue, this slide's expense.
Yeah, and I get it now, because it's what hung me up was the 5.6 million on the cleanup, which we know is a total of 7, and we've got 5. So I was just trying to reconcile.
Yep. So one thing on this slide is, you know, the place where you want to pay attention is the bottom section of this chart, the capital projects. That's what everybody wants to see funded, and that's the exciting part. But we do have 3 sections here: administrative costs, debt service costs, and capital projects. Now, the administration is honestly, for an area this large, not that large of numbers here. You know, a lot of administrative costs budgeted for the current year, although budgeted costs don't always come to fruition. A lot of times you budget higher than you actually want to spend. Working with city staff, they estimated a lower level of administrative costs long-term in the area here. But still looking at a couple of $1 million of administrative expenses over the next 5-year period. Yeah.
I just want to add, what's embedded in those administration costs too is staff's time that actually go into building some of this infrastructure. So they will get wrapped up into the overall cost of the building.
Does it get allocated to the project or the administrative overhead?
Project, like when you look at the capital fund, we break out the personnel expenses in the capital budget, but they actually code their time to the specific projects. So when we're doing our fixed asset additions.
So like in fiscal year 26, it wouldn't be in the 309, it would be in the 1.5 and the 3.2.
Well, there's some other administration, some of that's administration costs, whether
It's overall administration versus project.
yes, but there's some of this time is staff's time involved in projects that actually
I
get
think the
added.
question is the 309, the totality of administrative costs, or is it the part just going to administration of the URA and there's additional staff time in the individual project line items?
Oh, no, there's staff time in the individual.
That's what I was trying to clarify.
Yeah.
So the total is more than 309.
Yes.
Okay. In the series 2021 is the previous.
Borrowing, that's already committed to. Those payments are hard. You know, there's no avoiding them, and that's why we kind of put them at the top of the chart. You know, you've got to be able to pay your debt service and your admin costs before you have other funds available to pay for the capital projects. The city water fund line item for the debt service, that is not, you know, a done deal. That's if you choose to move forward with borrowing $12 million from the water fund, and the amount of those annual payments is not fixed either, because you're sort of borrowing from yourself. The urban renewal agency and the city are technically separate legal entities, but you have a lot more flexibility in how you structure that payment. But 10 years, the funds need to be repaid, and there is interest being charged to it, and it is a sizable amount that you'll need to cover over that period of time.
Years is that series 2021?
Oh, I can't remember the total amortization of it.
It's 20, 25 years, it kind of depends the broad, because it's that series 2021 is broke up into an A and a B. A is broadband, B is other URA funds, so each one has a little bit of different.
But around 20 years, best guess. Okay.
Yeah, we did that when interest rates were stupid low.
Yeah.
And just got a lot of money and put it in the bank.
And have been earning interest on it.
Does this show the interest
So that's,
Yeah, so the last slide had several $100,000 of interest assumed for this upcoming year. But then if you spend according to this schedule here, you know, we show that with the fund balance and with the proposed new loan, the fiscal year that you're in, you have the ability to fund a lot of projects at this moment in time. Currently estimated to be, you know, the pedestrian bridge, as well as some work on Ice Age Drive, and then the tannery cleanup predominantly in the next few years as those grant dollars come in. So lots of expenditures available at this point in time. And then in the next several years, really only spending the grant dollars that come trickling in those next couple of years, with all the resources after that point in time being tied up on the administration and debt service categories. And specifically, when we're looking at comparing the projected TIF revenue to debt service and administration, this first slide is saying, well, if you did that $12 million borrowing, and if you structured it to have level payments, so they're paying the same amount every year for the next 10 years until you pay it off, it's about $1.5 million in terms of annual payments for that new loan. And if you had that on top of the existing loan and your admin costs, you know, for the next several years, your annual TIF revenue is less than what you need to be able to cover those payments. When you get to 2028, you're now finally at a place where you've kind of hit equilibrium. And then starting in 2029 and beyond, your TIF revenue start to grow beyond what's needed for the debt service. And you could start thinking about funding another wave of projects or doing another borrowing.
But this doesn't show that $6 million beginning balance.
Right. So the only way you're able to survive, you know, 2025 is by using some of the existing fund balance to pay for that. Now, also in, you know, depending on when the borrowing actually occurs for this $12 million loan, maybe you don't have a full year of interest payments that need to be made in that first year. So the actual expenses might be less. There's wiggle room here, but just to show the general concept, you know, your current resources are significantly below what would be needed for this type of a financing plan. We then ran another scenario where the payments in the first few years are limited to interest-only payments on that new debt. And we say, we'll wait to make principal payments till we actually have the money to be able to do so. And then once you do have TIF revenue, that's more than enough to cover just the interest payments, then you pay as much principal as possible every year thereafter to try and catch up for the fact that you're making smaller payments in the early years. So just, you know, if you toggle between these slides, you can see you have the ability by making interest-only payments early on to significantly reduce the annual sort of operating deficit of the urban renewal area over the next couple of years. And then you just plug more of your TIF revenue to debt service in those next few years. That's the scenario that we ran for all of this. Again, you have ultimate flexibility in how you choose to pay back that proposed loan. That flexibility can be tempting to say, well, let's make really small payments early on so we can, you know, fund more of the capital projects we want to do. But you don't want to put yourself in a bind in later years where you realize that now you've got to devote, you know, some extreme measures to pay that off. So. And so then this is a sort of reprise of the earlier slide showing all of those projects, the $115 million of total costs, the $12 million or so that's been funded already, the $28 million that we show could be funded over the next 5 years. And that gives you a total amount of 40 million. You'd be able to chip away at the total costs of these. So there's still a funding gap of 73 million. And you can see that several of the projects are close to being fully funded in this picture, with a couple of the bigger ticket items, the Public Works Facility and Cedar Creek Trail undercrossing, you know, just not the funds around to be able to tackle them yet. And obviously, with the exception of grant dollars, which are locked into specific projects, you could clearly choose to move funds between any of these project priorities that you see here.
Well, like the Cedar Creek Bridge, the Public Works Facility, Sherwood Broadband, I mean, all of those are ones that we will continue to go after earmarks.
Right.
I assume the 24 million for Cedar Creek undercrossing is not the total cost of that project.
Oh,
It's gonna be way more.
That one's, we have to get.
It's very aspirational.
That one we'd have to get federal money for,
Yeah.
because
It's 2 years.
we can't do that. Yeah,
It's probably way further
It's
out
probably
than
67
29 anyway.
It's more than that.
And additionally, I mean, none of these have any projects on them for Sherwood West, if that goes through, right?
Whole different bucket of money, whole different funding stream. Sherwood West.
Sherwood West isn't in the URA.
I thought we had didn't we have some promises of trails or something that went over from there?
The bridge.
No.
Just the bridge?
Yeah, because you can't, it has to be in the boundaries of the.
Okay, I thought we had
There-
something with the.
Well, there is the potential of a road along N9, but
Okay, All right, that's fine. I
That's not true.
misunderstood what somebody was complaining about, I think. About the plan of
There's
URA.
no renewal in Sherwood West,
Okay,
and illegal to spend for renewal in Sherwood West as it's currently so.
So, this sort of sets the stage for the amount of funds available to pay for these projects and, what other sort of resources may be needed to be pursued to finish up funding these projects. Again, this is only for this 5-year period, and with the growth that you've seen in your cash flow, if you were to extrapolate this out for another 2 or 3 years, and if you're able to continue that pace of $40 million of new assessed value from construction each year, you could be in a much different place if you start looking at the year 2031 instead of the year 2029. So, keep your eye on the horizon and these numbers could turn around quite quickly.
The numbers are.
Right, they're already, right.
Great, it's a great number.
Do you have any slide that shows kind of how it's outperforming the original?
I didn't include that, but I can put that together and send it over to you guys, so you just have that.
It'd just be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So constrained cash flow, though not due to a lack of revenue, but just due to a high level of project expenditures in the area. So the debt service and administrative expenses are anticipated to exceed your TIF revenues in these next few years. So capital projects, in order to fund them, they're relying on your existing fund balance, new debt that you'd be taking on, and then the grant dollars that you've secured. We are forecasting very strong growth in this tax increment or urban renewal area. So that TIF revenue is growing substantially in these coming years. And that growth in revenue, it's not guaranteed, but it is very secure in this district. That forecast was looking at 3% growth on the existing property base here, very likely to occur. And then only looking at known projects that have already pulled permits, already have shovels in the ground. So this is a pretty solid forecast for this period of time that we're looking on here. But that growth is needed to pay for the debt service you're already planning to do. Planned future construction activity is vital. So it's not guaranteed, but anything you can do to continue to generate interest and new construction activity here, that's what's going to be what continues to make this successful. And then after fiscal year 25, like the current fiscal year, we don't expect that there's going to be additional funding for capital projects in this upcoming period. All of that TIF revenue really would be tied up on debt service and admin. So unless you're able to get these external funds, grants, et cetera, private developer contributions, you currently have all the capacity you're going to have in this 5-year period, and then you're paying off the debt, trying to get those new construction projects happening so that you come back in 2 or 3 years' time, and you now see we've got even more capacity on the horizon.
So when we say it only includes revenue from projects, we already know about that permits have been pulled.
Sorry, just to clarify, so if we go back to the project list.
Yeah.
I believe we only included, slight correction there, we only included applications that have permits and the actual building permits under construction, or they've applied for land use approval.
So like Schnitzer 2 and 3?
2 and 3, so
Okay, I'm like, oh, that doesn't even include those, but it does.
it includes phases 2 and 3, so.
Okay.
Flex industrial, 2 of them starting in 2026,
Okay.
those are Schnitzer phase 2 and phase
Gotcha.
3. Warehouse starting in 25, that's Panatone that's going up now.
Okay,
So it was,
either that or permits or land use
and
application.
it's very likely to occur based on a land use submittal.
Yeah.
But it's not guaranteed that they actually pull building permits.
Okay.
We assume they will, but.
Yeah.
That was there.
Is there like a 20-year income forecast?
So we haven't done an updated 20-year forecast since the original plan was created. Because we've updated the workbook for the short-term forecast, we certainly can extend a 20-year forecast. The question is just how aggressive do we want to be on the future construction activity beyond these known permits? Do we want to assume it continues at around 40 million a year? Do we think it actually could increase beyond that? Do we want to be more conservative and pull back? Do we want to run multiple scenarios? So, now that we've got the model built and we've got the short-term picture solidified, I could certainly work with staff to turn around and update a 20-year forecast with without a whole lot of extra effort here.
It'd be great to see one, I mean, with 3% is pretty much guaranteed, but you usually get a little bit on that.
Yeah.
Around like 4%. Do one like for 4%, 10%,
Various.
15, just various, just so we kind of know what the ranges are.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Oh, and the nature of our urban renewal district is. When is guesstimating when these vacant parcels will get developed. And then the vacant parcels will be built and that'll be done. And then it's just the 3%.
Yeah.
So unless
Yeah.
there's some
There's
redevelopment.
only so much that can be built in the URA, so.
Or we find reason to change the map.
Sure.
That was good information. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick. Any other questions? We good? Awesome, thank you so much.
Oh my God.
Question about